Happy Monday, Seattle hockey fans. Beniers reaches 100 points. Shane Wright looking pretty good with the big league. And of course, we've got the Coachella Valley Firebirds and the Kansas City Mavericks planning for their postseason run. We'll talk about that and more on today's Monday episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are the Seattle Kraken.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken. I'm your host, Erica L. Ayala, a contributor over at CBS Sports, and also the founder of Black Rosie Media, where we empower Black women and melanated creators in sports media. Welcome to this Monday edition of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken is brought to you by our friends at Sleeper. Make sure you download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions do apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. All right, so we did get that win against the Anaheim Ducks. Our gameplay against California teams that are not the LA Kings still in good position. We're going to hear from Matty Beniers shortly, who recorded his 100th point. We'll also later in the show hear from Shane Wright. And of course, it is a Monday. We're going to talk about the Kansas City Mavericks in particular. We'll talk about the Firebirds a little bit later in the week. But we know that the Seattle Kraken, they've got 2 games at home. This is the final homestand, the final chance to catch them at Climate Pledge Arena before they wrap up the season on the road. It's a season, again, that I've already questioned here on Locked On Kraken. Has this been a disappointment of a season? I think there are a lot of different ways to answer that. And so we're going to get into that as the postseason marches on, sadly, without the Seattle Kraken. All right, folks, as promised, though, let's get you over to Matty Beniers, who got his 100th point. This was in the game against the Anaheim Ducks. We see that Shane Wright scored twice in this game, and then Matty Beniers scored the third Seattle Kraken goal, the third and final Seattle Kraken goal on a power play. It was a 3-point performance for Shane Wright himself, so we're definitely going to hear from Wright. But first, let's hear from Matty Beniers.
Matty, 100 points in the NHL. Can you just reflect on your journey to this milestone a little bit with us?
Yeah, I mean, it's been good. I think been playing around a lot of really good players the last 2 and some years. So, it's just been fun. I'm having fun. And obviously I wish we were in a lot better position than we are right now. But, I think we're just trying to finish this year out strong and then move forward next year.
What have been some of the biggest lessons that you've learned since game 1 in this league?
There's a lot of games. And, you can't really worry too much about what happens in each game. You just got to grow and try to build off it and build momentum, get better every day. I think those lessons apply every year hockey, but especially in the NHL when you're playing that many games, it's it's a lot about mindset, a lot about physicality and taking care of yourself.
What stood out to you about the way that you guys just kind of continued to defensively tighten up as this one went on?
Yeah, that's what we need to do. There's been games where we haven't done that in the past. I think that's good out of us. We learned from games before where we have a lead and, we kind of let a team slip back into it. And I thought we did a good job tonight and, taking the plays that were there and making them. And then when they weren't there, playing hard-nosed hockey, putting it in deep, and creating offense that way.
Matty, people will talk about the importance of getting net front, but they don't talk about how difficult it is to get there and stay there. What goes into that for you?
Personally, I just try to avoid the other guys and not get cross-checked and sneak by them. But yeah, you're right. It's tough. It's an art. I'm still trying to get better and better at it. There's guys that are, great at it. They get in a front position. They get in the goalie's eyes. They do it all. So for me, I think it's just, working hard to get there every game. That's something the coaches have been harping on for, last couple of months, is getting to the net, and I've been trying to do that.
You called it an art, but how do you do it? Because guys know who you are, obviously. They know to watch out for number 10.
I literally just try to sneak by them. You try to, get their attention looking at the puck, and you try to get around them and, try to have good timing, getting to the net, getting out of the net. If you sit there, sometimes you're just dead weight and you get pushed off, especially me, not a huge guy. So for me, it's about timing and getting there at the right time.
Matty Beniers talked about a lot, talking about how he's taking in this season. It's, as you heard from Matty, been a difficult season, a disappointing season. And again, we'll talk about that here on Locked on Kraken. But this is, again, a game that the Seattle Kraken should have won, and they did. So we'll take that win. But again, Shane Wright opens up the account for the Seattle Kraken in the game. He got the assists from Brian Dumoulin's secondary assist, primary assist from Oliver Bjorkstrand. Second period, Shane Wright gets his third NHL goal, and it's Schwartz and Schultze that assist there. So you're getting productivity from the blue line, which I love to see from the Seattle Kraken. And Dave Haxel talked about it. Matty B talked about it a little bit, but there was a charge for him to get more in the net front. And that's how that power play goal got going for the Seattle Kraken. It was a deflected shot. And again, Shane Wright and Oliver Bjorkstrand there. So there's a lot of things that I like. We talked about, kind of playing the kiddos, playing the young guns, and Shane Wright has been getting time. I don't expect, or I should say, I think we can expect that Shane will play a significant role for the Coachella Valley Firebirds in their postseason. But it was good to see that, that some of the young guys for the Seattle Kraken were contributing. And I think there's a conversation that we really have to have. I mean, we saw that Wright and Cartier were in this game. We did not see Winterton and Morrison. We saw Cale Fleury, but he has now since been returned to the Coachella Valley Firebirds. In this game, we did not have Adam Larson or Vince Dunn. It appears that Larson is back with the team, so just something to note there. And, Philip Grubauer, he pushed aside 16 shots on 17 faced. Penalty minutes, once again, were an issue for the Anaheim Ducks. 12 minutes to hour 4. The Seattle Kraken were able to convert on that one power play we mentioned from Matty Beniers. The face-offs, I think, are still something that we have to continue to work on. 53.2% for the Seattle Kraken versus 46.8% for the Ducks. Shots on goal, 27-17. Usually we're on the other side of that, but we had the 27 shots, so we'll take it. Now, we did get a more hits from Anaheim, just something I don't put a lot of weight per se into hits, but 43 hits for the Ducks, 32 for the Seattle Kraken. I mentioned a lot about Shane Wright, and coming up on this episode of Locked on Kraken, we're going to hear from Shane himself. So stay tuned for that. Another episode of Locked on Kraken, part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Today's episode of Locked on Kraken, as I mentioned at the top of the show, is brought to you by our friends at Sleeper. It is well beyond the halfway point of the NHL season. In fact, we're getting ready for the postseason. But regardless of where we are in the standings, aka not in a playoff position, if you're the Seattle Kraken, I want to remind you that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy hockey app of the Locked on NHL Network. And even though the Seattle Kraken will not be moving forward much beyond the next week and a half, we can still take a look at the other playoff teams, and you can 100x your money by knowing everything you need to know. And the way you find that out is by listening to Locked on NHL, and yes, Locked on Kraken, because we will be following, of course, the playoffs, not just because it's still hockey, but also we got to figure out what the Seattle Kraken are going to look like in the future. And on Sleeper, all you have to do is pick whether studs like Bjorkstrand, Wright, Beniers, even Joey Decord will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and so much more in any given game. To 100x your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me right, Kraken fans. You can 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start swinging big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Welcoming you back here to this episode of Locked On Kraken. And I told you all about our experts in that Sleeper ad, but remember that Locked On Kraken also has the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel. And this is another opportunity for you to hear directly from our Locked On NHL experts, whether you're doing it to make picks on Sleeper, on FanDuel, or just because you're a hockey fan and you want to know what's going on. Make sure you listen to and watch Locked On Sports Today because it brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or for free on the Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And these days, the Seattle Kraken, there's that meme of the guy kind of walking with his significant other and then turning his head looking at someone else. I saw that in relation to Matty Beniers versus Shane Wright. Let's not do that, folks. We are not pinning these two centermen against each other. We know it's been a rocky road for Matty B, but he's far from the only one. And his season, in my opinion, much less egregious than some other things that we've seen. So let Matty B live. Let Shane Wright live. Let the young guys inject some energy into our veins. But you know what? Let's also hear from Shane Wright. We heard from Matty B. Let's hear from Shane. 3-point performance. And he's really been looking great in what was controversial to some people, but certainly a very start and stop to his first few NHL games. To see him thriving now, I think, is a testament to settling in and trusting the process. And I want the Seattle Kraken, just in general, to do more of that. But let's hear how Shane is feeling.
Shane, it looked like you were locked in right from the get-go. I mean, you had that stolen puck early in the first period. Does that kind of stuff help you get set up for the rest of your game when you're able to do stuff like that early on?
Maybe a little bit. I think anytime you get a chance early, it kind of gets your legs into it a little better. But felt all right from the start, and try to just keep that going. And it's nice to get a little chance there at the start as well. You've
made a habit the last few games just getting to the net front and doing what you've done so well in junior and AHL. I mean, is there a trick to it at the NHL level? Is it a little more difficult than at that lower, just because they got such big defenders here?
Yeah, obviously the D here are a lot stronger and they're physical and they box you out really well. So you got to be elusive. You got to be able to spin off them and try to get underneath them, try to get buy position underneath at the net. So it's a constant battle. Trying to get that body space at the net there. But I was obviously able to get underneath the guy on the goal there.
Jaden sends you that great pass from below the goal line. How valuable is it playing with guys like that?
Unbelievable. Pretty lucky guy to be playing with him and Ebbs there. So obviously great pass. Couldn't have put in a better spot for me, and all I did was finish it there.
How's the chemistry kind of growing between you three now that you have 3 games under your belt with them?
Yeah, definitely growing. Each and every game we're always talking. We're always kind of growing that chemistry and talking on the bench after shifts and what we see out there, what we think we can do better. And each game that chemistry is going to grow, and hopefully we can keep it rolling here.
How did the flow of the game go for you? It seemed like the beginning of the game maybe not quite as good as it was later in the game. Like things picked up after that first goal.
As a team, you mean? Yeah, I think that's just kind of how the game goes. Sometimes there's ebbs and flows. You have ups and downs. Sometimes you're rolling shift after shift. Playing the ozone. Other times, maybe you're fighting a little bit and you're spend some time in your own end. But I think that just kind of happens. And we fought through that a little bit. We got through that a little bit slow start, but I think after that, our second period was great as well, and just kind of built on that.
So that was Shane Wright. You heard him talking also about his line mates. He has been centering Jaden Schwartz and Jordan Eberle. You heard how he just really likes that chemistry. I'm a little gutted because, of course, that means that we did not get Jared McCann on that line. But McCann, I think, is probably better suited on the wing for the Seattle Kraken anyway. So maybe Shane Wright takes Triple J down to J squared with a little Wright in the middle. But the lines overall for the game, the win, the 3-1 win over the Anaheim Ducks, from left to right, Burakovsky, Gord, and Tolvanen. Schwartz, Wright, and Eberle, Jared McCann, Matty Beniers, Oliver Bjorkstrand. That was a very influential line. They had the second least amount of time on ice. The fourth line listed as Cartier, Belmar, and Tanev had 7:25 time on ice. McCann, Beniers, Bjorkstrand 8:31, but Beniers had a goal. Oliver Bjorkstrand assisted twice, I believe. And then, of course, you had the very effective line of Schwartz, Wright, Eberle, 9:49 time on ice. They had the most time on ice, followed immediately by Burakovsky, Gord, and Tolvanen. So, I'm very curious to see how lines are going to swap out next year. Ty Cartier, kind of the odd man out here. I think at least the way this roster is situated, I understand his positioning. I do think there are questions, obviously, with what we're going to do with Tanev, what we're going to do with Belmar. I mean, the Tomas Tatar ship seems to have sailed. And it's interesting because I do think there were times where he was effective. But remember, we went through the time on ice after the comments that Dave Haxtell made and him saying that, there's going to have to be some difficult conversations. And it would appear, at least, that Tomas Tatar was a part of some of those maybe difficult conversations. And I'm curious, what was the change there? Because again, Tomas Tatar, there was a time where he was one of the players that was at least getting our offense activated, but things change all the time. And there's going to be some difficult questions that need to be answered with regard to this lineup. And we're coming up on that pretty soon. The off season is only a week and a half away. So we're going to have these conversations. Really, I guess it's a little more than a week and a half. It's 2 weeks away, at least for the Seattle Kraken, because we will not be moving on to the playoffs. But coming up, let's talk about the Mavericks in our Mavericks Monday. This is Locked On Kraken. I'm your host, Erica L. Ayala. We'll be right back to talk a little bit about our ECHL squad. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Now, we talk about it all the time. This is probably one of my favorite ad reads because we're talking about passion, drive, and patience, and how it's the formula for winning championships. And it's also what will help keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available for U.S. customers. Safe traveling, everyone. Thanks as always for making Locked On Kraken a part of your daily destination. And congratulations are in order for our Kansas City Mavericks. The Kansas City Mavericks, we have already talked about that they are on their way to the playoffs, but they've done it with some flair. They've got 2 games left, but already they've already broken a franchise record for points in a season. And that is all in in the process of becoming the Brabham Cup winners. So that just means that they are the regular season points champion. They actually clinched this on Friday, April 5th. And later in the weekend, again, they recorded the most points ever in franchise history. They sit at 110 points after their 4-3 overtime win against Utah. It has been, I'm reading now, quote, "It has been a historic season for the Mavericks. In addition to racking up most points in a season, Kansas City has laid claim to the Brabham Cup and the Mountain Division title. Additionally, the Mavericks set the ECHL record for road wins in one season. They have scored the most goals in franchise history. Patrick Curry has set the team's record for goals in a season and the ECHL franchise mark for points. And GM and head coach and a friend of the show, Tad O'Had, became the winningest head coach in ECHL franchise history." So there's a lot of great things happening up and down the pipeline. We'll talk again about the Coachella Valley Firebirds a little bit later in the week, but I love to see this. You know, I've been able to see the Kansas City Mavericks. For those who are insiders, you've seen exclusive interviews, and I've also dropped snippets here on the Locked On Kraken show. But you know, these are going to be, at least some of these players are going to be players that you're going to see in Coachella Valley. They're going to be players that you might see at this with the Seattle Kraken. And so getting to see them live in living color here in Tulsa has been amazing. Tad O'Had really gets it. I love having conversations with him, and he has been the coach within our system who, at least in our conversations, has illuminated things for me when it comes to the process. And I think a part of that is because I'm most familiar with the Seattle Kraken. Obviously, I've attended 2 out of their 3 training camps. I get out to Seattle a lot. I catch the team on the road. And of course, this is the Locked On Kraken show. So we're following that news pretty regularly. And then you have, of course, Jessica Campbell and Disco Dan Bilesma in Coachella Valley. And that's when I like to bring in JD, or Jason Hernandez, who not only is a Locked On NHL host, but happens to be our voice of the Coachella Valley Firebirds. He gets that eye test. He sees the team a lot. And so we bring him in to talk about what is the balance between what the Seattle Kraken need, aka a lot, and how the Coachella Valley Firebirds are continuing to develop. And I think that's been a very stringent, or I should say abrasive relationship with the Seattle Kraken and with Shane Wright and the fan base. Now, that being said, I cannot stress enough that I think how Shane Wright has been managed this year, I think it's showing in his game. And will he be with the big team next year? I think it's very possible, but it also depends on a few things, including what the Seattle Kraken do in the offseason and how Shane continues to develop in the handful of games we have left in this season. So if you heard that clip from Matty Beniers, and of course Dave has been talking about this as well, there's still things to play for, even though this is a Seattle Kraken team that has fallen short of getting to the playoffs. And again, I do want to have a conversation. We have to ask the question, is this a failure? And I kind of went into, for those who are not everydayers and OGers, well, welcome to Locked On Kraken. But for those OGers and everydayers, you know that I went into detail and even went as far as to define the word failure, because I do think we have to have a real conversation about this season for the Seattle Kraken and what we've heard are the expectations and what are the reasonable expectations. And if we met those, spoiler alert, too long, didn't read, or in this case, didn't watch / listen, I think that we fell short of what were the reasonable expectations for this team, given how we performed last year, but also given what we had on the ice this year. And where we fell short was in the effort. And that, for me, is a really tough pill to swallow. Not on tomorrow's episode, because tomorrow will be a game day episode, but later in the week, I'm sure you've seen that article that we're hearing that Dave Haxtell's position is safe through the end of the season, for the next 2 weeks. But what will happen moving forward? The one and only Jeff Baker got into that in one of his most recent Seattle Times articles. I certainly read it. I'm not sure if you have, but if you didn't, don't worry. You've got some time. We'll talk about it midweek. And I'll break it all down for you. I'll tell you what Jeff said, and I'll give you my instant analysis. So make sure that you, if you're not already, you subscribe to Locked On Kraken, and make sure you are also listening on your favorite podcast platform. Either way, we want you to subscribe. Hit the notifications so you know when an episode of Locked On Kraken is coming. So that's going to do it for this episode, this Monday episode. The Seattle Kraken did hit the ice earlier today. As I mentioned, Adam Larson back with the team. If there were any other significant updates, make sure you tune in tomorrow so we can talk about that, because, oh, baby, the Seattle Kraken will be taking on the Arizona Coyotes. We did see Philip Grubauer in net last go round. Will Joey Daccord get a chance to avenge a tough and very interesting loss to the Coyotes in Arizona? Well, I guess we'll have to watch the game to find out. Erica L. Ayala going to sign out, but not before reminding you to be kind to yourself. Please be kind to one another. And as always, we hold fast, we stay true, and we say loud and proud, let's go Kraken. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everybody.